Hello, I'm going to be covering part 2 of the ASP.NET tutorial series, and in this part we'll be adding our basic create, read, update, and delete functionality by adding in a details page that brings up what courses the student that you select is enrolled in and what their grades are in those courses. We'll be adding try catch blocks to our create page and our edit pages. And we will be changing the delete method to match the style of the create and edit pages, which I will explain when we get to that point. The first thing we're going to be doing, though, is modifying the details page, which uses this thing called route data, which you can read about in the tutorial. But basically what that means is that it'll be taking the URL and using the ID that gets added on to the end of it when you click on the details, and it will be querying our database for a student with that ID and bringing up the information based off of that. Alright, so let's get started. First we're going to open up Visual Studio, our Contoso University project. The three files that we'll want open are our details page, our delete page, and our student controller. Student controller will be under controllers, student controller. The delete and details pages will be under views, students, and then delete and details respectively. So first thing we're going to want to have open is our details page, and I have all of the code in these notepad documents. It's the same code that's on the website, so you can just take it from there if you want. But we're just going to take this and we're going to put it here at the bottom underneath this last /dd tag and right above the closing DL tag. So that what this code does is that it adds the table in that shows what classes the students enrolled in and what their grades are in that class. So now if you try to run this code just like it is, it will end up compiling and having a problem because it needs route data to be able to figure out what student you're talking about. So it'll come up with this. But if you go back to your students page, alright, so on your students page, you can click on your student and you can find the details. And then it will load this and it'll show you their course titles and what grades they're in, because it's using this, which is the route data that I was talking about earlier. When you have details / and then 1, because this student is assigned the ID of 1, and so now it knows what details to show. And so that's pretty much all the changes we're making to the details page. So we can go ahead and close this and go back to Visual Studio. We can close our details page because we're not going to be modifying that anymore. Okay, so we're going to come over to our student controller file and we're going to be modifying our create and our edit methods. Now, when you go down, you'll notice that there are actually two create methods, and we're going to be wanting to modify the second one because all this first one is doing is calling the web page to come up so that you can put in the student information. The second one is the one that's actually adding the student into the database. And all we're going to really want to be doing is adding in a try catch block around this if statement so that if the student isn't able to be added into the database for some reason, it reports that to the user and lets them know that, the student that they tried to put in didn't get added into the database and that they should try to do it again. The other thing that it does is it removes this ID from the bind include, because we don't want the user to be able to dictate what the student ID is. We want that to be just dynamically given to it. So I'm going to come over here to my code, and as you can see, the try catch block is right there. No longer has the ID. This code is also in the tutorial, so I'm just going to copy and paste over this with that code, and then we're going to basically be doing the same thing for the edit methods, which again have two different ones. This one just brings up the web page. This is slightly more complex because it's bringing up the information for whichever student you selected, and then this method is basically the same thing where it's updating that entry in the database and we're adding in the try catch block for the same reason as before. so that if there happens to be a problem modifying the data in the database, it lets the user know that, and so they can retry it again. So we'll just copy over that again, and there. And then the last thing that we're changing is the delete method, because if you'll notice, the delete method is slightly different. It again has two methods, but this time they don't have the same name. Like up here in the edit and the creates, this is still edit, and this is called edit again. So we want to change the delete function to be the same format as those two. So what we're going to be doing is this time we actually are going to be modifying both methods. And we're going to come over to our step 4. We're going to be replacing the first method with this code, again found in the tutorial. And then basically all this is doing is adding in this boolean of if there was an error or not, with deleting the file. And so if that error is true, it tells you that the delete failed and try again. And then what this lets us do is that this lets us, because the method signature is different, this lets us change this to just delete instead of delete confirmed. And so I'm going to go ahead and take the code from here, and again we're adding in a try-catch block for the same reasons as before. If there's some kind of problem making the changes to the database, we want to let the user know that. And then of course this time, if it has an error, it will return that the save changes error was true, and so when it comes back to this will no longer equal false, it'll equal true, and then it'll give this message, and it'll bring you straight back to the same page and just let you try to delete the student again. So the only other thing that we need to do is go into our delete HTML page, and we are going to put one line of code right after the H2 heading and the H3 heading right here. And all this is doing is displaying the error message if it needs to pop up. And that concludes tutorial 2.